So the title of this session is Capitalism and the Social Contract. And what I'm going to do is to shift a little bit from the notion that technology shapes society to look at how society shapes technology. And for doing that, I'm going to look forward towards the future, but learning from history. The historical record since the Industrial Revolution shows us that there have been 5 technological revolutions, all very different from each other, but with a very similar sequence. Each of them has 2 main periods. One first, about 20, 30, or 40 years, which is the one we've just gone through, which is controlled by finance, which I call the installation period, when usually it's the markets that define how to do it because nobody knows. It's a huge experiment. But it always ends in a bubble, and that bubble and the crash brings a recession, and in that recession, society chooses which way to take that huge technological potential. Now, the 5 revolutions, if we can look at each of them, we had the first one, which is the Industrial Revolution, which went through Canal Mania, and then had the Great British Leap, which was in fact the Napoleonic Wars, but anyway, it was a big, huge thing, and Britain then became capable of doing the next big wave, which was basically the age of railways and cheap coal, which brought, after the crash, the Victorian boom, after the railway mania and panic. Then we had the first globalization, which was followed by the Belle Epoque, and our more familiar Roaring Twenties, the mass production revolution with autos, housing, radio, aviation, electricity, after which we had the Golden Age, but not without going through a horrendous period of hunger, unemployment, immigration, secular stagnation hypotheses, and looking at the future because mass production was going to eliminate jobs and agriculture was mechanizing, so we were going to have a horrible world. And after that, when the war taught us about mass production and mass consumption and so on, we actually managed to set up, with the welfare state, suburbanization, the Cold War, etc., the post-war golden age. Now we have our own second globalization, which is the ICT revolution. We've already gone through the first installation period. We've already gone through not 1, but 2 huge bubbles, and we are now still, according to me, in that period when we have to decide which way to shape this technological potential. I think we can have a global, sustainable, knowledge society golden age, but we've got to do it. We've got to make it. It doesn't happen by markets. They are socio-political choices. So they have to shape the technological potential, which is huge. Now, of course, we've been talking about inequality. Yes, history shows us that there are periods of inequality and periods of reversal of that inequality. The Roaring Twenties are very similar in terms of the percentage of income earned by the top 1% of taxpayers, the declared taxes, who knows how many, but anyway, 25%. And the same thing now with your NASDAQ and 2000s bubble. Both bubbles brought the 1% up to there, but we had a 1% earning only 10% of total income and a much better spread of incomes during the golden age. Well, that is what I hold that Piketty does not see, because he doesn't have the statistics with which to see it, is that we've had a pendular swinging of inequality. Not necessarily as good as the golden age, but relatively better each time. How about unemployment? Well, history again shows us that the new high productivity industries create the best jobs, but not necessarily the most jobs. If we look at the US post-war boom, we had manufacturing GDP growing 2.5 times, But manufacturing jobs only increased by 30%, much, much less, because they had very high productivity. However, total employment was multiplied by 5. Now, where was this? This was, if we take the second line after the World War, we have the post-war boom. There is employment in manufacturing, the blue line, just 30% increase. Employment in trade, government, and services, huge increase. And construction, transport, utilities, real estate, all the rest, all the little things that have to do with this way of growth that was created, the welfare state and all this sort of more equality, bringing all the workers into middle-class consumption. This was a way of shaping it, because in fact, the new technologies destroy jobs. That's how they increase productivity. The new ways of life are the ones that create the jobs, but you can choose different ways. Hitler, Stalin, and the Keynesian democracies used the same mass production technologies. They just shaped them differently. And that's exactly what could happen and happens each time we actually have a lot of choice. Now, I hold, from looking at history, that it's the changes in lifestyles which have occurred each time with each revolution that have brought the golden ages. And I mean by golden ages the time when the benefits of the technological revolution are not concentrated in one end but spread. Of course, there is a whole theory about new technologies, the ICT technologies bringing this polarizing spread and the high skills and all these things. That is true and not true. It is true if we continue with the current lifestyle. It's not true if we change it. Now, the American way of life is obsolete. It does not correspond with the technologies we have. It was ideal for deploying the mass production revolution, but it's wrong for the information revolution in a globalized world. The mass production revolution was about homogeneity. This technology is about differentiation. We have to choose between differentiating just in incomes or having different ways of life, styles of life that bring equal satisfaction, equivalent satisfaction. So what we must do is deploy a potential for high productivity manufacturing with job-rich, creative, healthy, and sustainable lives, much more associated with community, with sharing economy, with all these things, and we'll probably have to add basic incomes or negative income taxes or some other combination in order to get the people who are in welfare to do jobs instead of being depressed, because that's horrible for an enormous part of society to be actually lost in terms of their dignity and all the rest, and we cannot accept it. But this is where we are. You know what that is? That is an automobile in 1898. What does it look like? Well, like the old carriages. Why? Well, because the shops could only do carriages. They didn't know how to make automobiles. And the guy who's sitting up there knew how to, had horses in front. So he sits where he was, and he has the wheel. And we call horsepower the power of the engine. Now, that's exactly what we're doing with this current revolution. We're thinking of it in terms of the old model. What we need is to make a leap into the future. That's the 1913 mass-produced Model T, a huge organizational leap where you made cars in a different way. You didn't make it in shops. You actually made an automobile with its own logic. And from then on, we still have the same automobile, but of course, with all the advances since then. We've got to do something similar in the social institutional realm in order to take advantage of this fantastic new thing. Oh, sorry. So what society hasn't done yet is to find the real life-changing powers of the ICT revolution. We don't have to measure how many less workers are going to be in manufacturing cars or how many less workers in this or that. We've got to know what else society can do with this bounty in order to create a new society which is good for all. And when I mean all in the globe, because we're talking about full global development. So I think that a new direction for a global positive-sum game in the age of information technology has three components. One is cheap, universal ICT. This is obvious. We've got to get everybody with access to ICT and with knowledge about it and all the rest for education and for work and for creativity and for entrepreneurship and so on. We need full global development, among other things, because that's the only way to have enough markets for what the developed and the advanced countries can do. Imagine the infrastructure, the equipment, all the things that have to be done in the developing world if all countries were developing. But of course, we wouldn't be able to do it if we didn't do it green. So it's got to be green growth, which is the direction which we haven't mentioned once today. That is the most important problem or solution that we now have. Climate change is not the problem. Climate change is the solution. That's like the war. You know, if you decide to change, not just climate change, but scarcity of materials, of water, of, just the planetary limits, if we have to face that, the amount of innovation that could happen across every activity, every industry, lifestyles, production styles, transportation, everything, enormous changes. It's a challenge. It's a challenge of multiple challenges, and that is a direction for innovation. Just like suburbanization and the Cold War were directions for innovation for mass production. So what does this mean? A different direction for growth and well-being. We have no longer possession and disposal of goods, but how about rental, maintenance, and recycling of durable goods? With maintenance only, if we can be upgrading them all the time and so on, we could have enough jobs in the advanced world to replace all the ones that are lost in manufacturing. Then energy and materials intensity as satisfaction, people possession of things on the cars, on the things.
I was just checking this was all happening, which it obviously is.
Sorry?
And they have this in their packet? Or
The ghost in the machine.
Sorry.
Carlota.
So we would have to shift to intangibles, to services and human relations. Somebody already talked about the importance of human relations, which is one of the things that this does, but we have already seen how many tangible things have been transformed into intangibles, like the music industry and all the rest. Go from mass and homogeneity to diversity, change, and adaptability. This is not a mass production, equalizing, homogenizing set of technologies. This is a diversifying, adaptable, constantly innovating set of technologies. So we've got to move in that direction, and that will mean a lot of possibilities for jobs and for creation and all the rest. Going from passivity, couch potatoes, obesity, to health and creativity, a whole range of occupations associated with health and creativity, some of them with computers, some of them with people. Suburban sprawl, polluted cities, we go to green, compact cities and high-tech rural. Just the changing, the impact, the whole revamping of all that would create a completely different world. And how will it be? Well, full of mobiles, robots, and further ICT, which would be designed for increasing productivity, not only human productivity, but the productivity of resources, which would become a much more important goal if we have policies that favor that, including taxing them instead of taxing jobs. And aiding sustainability. That's the other direction in which ICT is enormously powerful and can be used for that. So what I want to tell you is, technology simply defines the space of the possible. As I said, Hitler, Stalin, and the Keynesian democracies used it differently. We need to create a positive-sum game between government, business, and society, which is a socio-political choice, not a technological choice. And that requires intelligent and bold social and institutional innovation. Thank you.